I like Disney, and I like the year 2006, but they aren't very good friends. It's considered one of the weakest years in modern Disney history, because their closest thing to a main animated movie was The Wild, Whoopee, and even Pixar's movie Cars was fine, but not up to snuff with their other output, at the time at least. Whereas on television, High School Musical and Hannah Montana aired on Disney Channel, completing its transition into a tween pop network, leaving its lineup of animation in dire straits. One cartoon would come out that would aim to please both sides of the channel's audience and succeed with flying colours. That was the following year's Phineas and Ferb. But before then, there was another show that was kinda, sorta, maybe the answer. I'm talking The Replacements. From my experience, I remember watching The Replacements quite a bit when it came out Down Under, Down Under. I thought the characters were funny, the stories and premise were interesting, and that it would quickly catch on. That it did not. It was one of those Disney shows that kind of came and went without much of a fuss, and when Phineas and Ferb started, there wasn't much else I wanted to watch. The Replacements was kind of left in the dust and has been forgotten to an extent. Most people remember it as being a very average, uninspired kids cartoon. That got me to wonder, is it worth thinking about now in more detail? And is it too early to do this sort of retrospective review of it?
No.
This show was created by a man named Dan Santat. He wasn't an animator, never had a career in that. Rather, he was a children's book author and illustrator, most notably providing art for a book series called Otto Undercover, written by Cheers actress Rhea Perlman, who's also the wife of Danny DeVito. This is getting pretty weird, so back on track. An idea Dan eventually formulated for a book of his own was of a boy who replaces his parents with a wrestler and a cowgirl after getting tired of his old parents' rules and coming across an ad for a company called Flameco who could do that. But he soon decided to pitch his idea to Disney, who were impressed and decided to make it a cartoon series. Many differences were made. The boy was given a sister. They don't exactly replace their parents, rather they're orphans who get adopted when the program starts. And it was decided to make replacing people a regular thing in the series, with almost every episode revolving around the siblings calling for the company Flameco to replace someone they don't want. With a formula installed that could easily lead to tons of interesting stories and that kids could be entertained by, The Replacements, not to be confused with the 80s rock band or the 2000s sports film starring Keanu Reeves, premiered on Disney Channel on July 28, 2006. From what I've dug up, critical reception was somewhat favourable of this formula and the characters, but it didn't manage to hook too many people. When it ended a little less than 3 years later, on March 30th, 2009, that was that. Dan Santat went back to working exclusively on books. Very good books, I want to add. I highly recommend reading After the Fall, How Humpty Got Back Up Again, if you're suffering from anxiety or depression. It's amazing how much he's improved his craft. But on The Replacements, he still seems to like the show and became very impressed with the talent and persistence of animators, but vastly prefers the creative freedom he has in the literary industry over the more executive-driven world of television. I can appreciate a creator with this sort of honesty and care for his works, but can I respect his one and only cartoon with a more critical view? To heavily paraphrase the theme song, Todd and Riley were oh so sad until they came across a Flameco ad. They sent away $1.98 and got a super spy mum and a daredevil dude of a dad. And now anytime they come across adults who are sly and deny and defy them and make things bad, they simply call Conrad Fleam on one of their Flameco phones to have them replaced. Now, anytime they want to make a change, modify or rearrange, although it might get kinda strange. Okay, that's enough of that. I love this theme song. It's one of my favorites of the era. It tells you everything you need to know about the story in a fun, concise way, and makes it sound less crazy than it is. I mean, kids with phones? How silly! And their flip phones, which also date the show somewhat, but that isn't the only thing holding it back from timelessness. I bet you noticed more than a few surface-level similarities to The Fairly Odd Parents, a show airing on Nickelodeon around this time. Both are formula shows that emphasize the message of be careful what you wish for, and both start with some kids getting a new set of parents, one of them being a goofball played by Darren Norris. But I would not call The Replacements a carbon copy of The Fairly Odd Parents or anything like that. For one thing, it's far less surreal in concept, and a little less so in jokes, and since some Fairly Odd Parents alumni were prominent writers and story editors on The Replacements, I can cut it some slack for managing to be its own thing for the most part. While the clamshell design of the Fleamco phones dates the show to the mid to late 2000s, some of the jokes and stories they make out of these kids having a little too much technological freedom have held up pretty well, and the impact their misadventures leave on their world are as humorous and interesting as I wanted them to be. I won't forget how the school they go to is at first called George Washington Middle School, but in one episode where Todd, robotic bodyguard on standby, gets the name wrong in a pop quiz, the school just revises its history curriculum, so it's renamed George Stapler Middle School for the rest of the show. It always hangs there as a visual reminder of the show's themes of privilege and responsibility, and how working through them wrongly carries Todd and Riley to strange places. Todd in particular. He's a pretty run-of-the-mill cartoon troublemaker who likes boy stuff, mainly skateboarding, pranks, and his video game console, the Game Cone. I came to like him anyhow, between his hidden genius and hidden love for his family. His older sister Riley is also rather interesting, but similarly characterized by girly stuff like sugar, boy bands, and ponies. But the journeys she goes on about responsibility and friendship are arguably deeper than Todd's. Their chemistry is a rather typical sibling dynamic, they fight a lot but make up a lot, there isn't anything wrong with that. Their adoptive mother, Agent K, is a British secret agent, being very alert and protective, but a little too willing to spring into action. She's very entertaining too, gives good advice, and provides a strong role model in all but her cooking. Dick Daring, on the other hand, is an airheaded and reckless stunt driver who has empathy to be fair, but can't seem to shake off a lot of those dumb cartoon dad tropes and be as good a character as the rest of the Daring family. Even the car is a better character than him. Car, Agent K's talking means of transportation, is another important member of the cast, and by far the best too. He's got cool gadgets, a snide sense of humour, and just the fact that the car is this entertaining is so strange. They also get a pet mule, Prince Cinnamon Boots, who just about counts as a character. He's okay as a quirky pet, but I don't think there was this untapped well of mule jokes that the show was desperately clamouring for dibs on. Another prominent character is Conrad Fleam, the guy responsible for Fleamco and the program Todd and Riley use. I like his transition from a plot device into a more fleshed out character. He's practically part of the family by the show's end. Riley's friends include Abby, a rich black girl who tends to bring her back down to earth when she's acting up, but is quick to fall to peer pressure, which, sure. And Tasumi, a Japanese girl who cosplays as a shonen character to hide her true identity. I already feel like I've said too much and made the top of her list, beating out Mecha Gamazor. But the diversity doesn't stop there. Todd's best friend is Hakobo, an Indian boy who does a lot of best friend things. It was hard for me to remember if he had any interests, but he seemed to be a little nerdier than Todd, but a lot less nerdy than Shelton. I know what you're thinking, Rudy from Chalk Zone has seen better days. However, the real make it or break it aspect to him is his voice, which is a cross between Jerry Lewis and Gilbert Gottfried. I love it, but yeah, it's about as loud as it sounds. Buzz is about as basic as a bully character can get. He plays pranks, he's mean but not an enemy, and he has his own little quirks of really liking his own jokes and being embarrassed about being a really good dancer. He's fine. Another bully is Sierra, the popular girl and the top of the cheerleader pyramid. She doesn't get the same nuance as Buzz, however, her only genuine spotlight being pretty early on and soon forgotten. Phil Mygrave is, of course, Dick Daring's stunt coordinator and assistant, but doesn't really say or do a lot. The name's funny, but he could have been more. Dr. Scorpius is a supervillain and Agent K's greatest adversary. You have to take their word for it that he's evil sometimes, because his threats come more in his gadgets than his personality. He follows the same template as Draken and Doofenshmirtz, but it's proven to be a good template for sure. I'd say my least favourite character was Riley's potential boyfriend, Johnny, who's about as bland and boring as they come, and he does a number on Riley's character too eventually when she starts getting clingy. There are plenty of other characters like Sierra's twin lackeys, the cheapskate principal, a boatload of people who get replaced, and a boatload of replacements. They vary, but I have to hand it to them all being distinct and full of life.
So unless you know of a special corporation that has the ability to somehow replace me with a mayor who lets you skateboard wherever you want, well, you just out of luck.
Like that could happen.
Season 1 mostly follows the format of two 11-minute segments per episode. It's Stories are quick, simple, and adhere to the established formula without much fuss. Developing it, then making attempts to subvert aspects of it, which goes a long way in making you feel like you're watching a set of adventures rather than just a bunch of cartoons. And these stories are usually complete with some lesson about family values or responsibility, yada yada yada. It's not preachy or anything, it's just more noticeable compared to other cartoons of this style. Besides, it always has a sense of humour about it, which can best be seen in the ending PSAs, where the characters will talk about some kind of emotional strength, usually accompanied with clips showing the opposite of what they want. They were a fun little bow to wrap each episode up with, and it's a shame they were only used this season. The animation's also pretty good, and the design work of course fits right into this 2000s era of geometric character shapes and thick outlines, but the background art goes for a unique painted look. I dig it, but it might look more cheap depending on what kind of monitor you have. Suffice to say, this is an art style I dig, though I can understand why they made some touch-ups for the second season.
Way too happy! Way too flannel! Way too last season!
As you can see, the designs have been modified a bit, the clothes don't look as good in my opinion, but the noses was something that needed fixing. And while the show has always been made in high definition, the painted backgrounds look a little cleaner and bigger to accommodate the increasing amount of HDTVs at the time, though I don't think it was broadcast in that format until after it ended. Regardless, I think the changes were good, though I still prefer the look of Season 1 for being a bit more bold. There are other differences too, like the show changing to a half-hour format, and not needing to take long to get comfortable, regularly whipping out parallel storylines with both daring kids so they can say and do more per episode. But a bigger evolution came in the form of overarching plot points. Riley and Johnny start dating, but then break up because Riley starts acting too weird around him, and I seriously don't know jack about Johnny. Buzz starts getting more suspicious of the phones Todd and Riley use, because apparently the Flameco business is meant to be kept a secret, because who knows what'll happen if they go mainstream. The fact a character as dense as Buzz is the main intruder in this arc is pretty funny, and gives him another purpose seamlessly. There's also Tasumi being revealed to be a massive J-pop star, and almost needing to leave town. It's this whole touching story that makes her more empathetic and trustworthy for the rest of the show, and I like that too. Throughout my reviewing history, I've never seen a second season shake things up this much, and that includes Pokemon, The Critic, and The Proud Family. The replacements didn't turn into a completely different show or anything, but it did what good Season 2s do, challenge the conventions of Season 1 and evolve its concepts to make better television. I figured I'd follow suit and change up my format a bit as I talk about the highlights of the replacements. I'll just do a top 15 and bottom 7 list, combining episodes from both seasons. Starting with campiest episode ever, which gives a good old-fashioned underdog story with the theme of a summer camp performance contest, and something about Riley becoming a bog monster, which isn't all too bad either. Dick Deering's All-Star Holiday Stunt Spectacular sees the cast put on just about the corniest holiday special imaginable, complemented well with some backstage drama. I haven't watched many holiday specials of this variety, but I'm sure it's a great spoof because I didn't need specific references to enjoy it. A Daring Romance is a pretty good wedding anniversary plot, and one of those times I could fully understand why Dick and Agent K can make for a great couple. An odd couple, sure, but Dick can really make it work. R2, A Tale of Two Rileys, is your standard cartoon robot clone episode. Riley gets a clone that causes mayhem and discord between her and her friend Abby, finally giving their friendship a deeper spotlight. About time, too. In Skategate, Todd replaces his town's mayor with that of a pro skater, and so it naturally falls into skateboard anarchy. It's a fun morality tale about the importance of rules conveyed through the perception of skating culture. Late Night with Todd and Riley is a tale of two sleepovers, one where Todd and his gang sneakily watch a monster movie and get freaked out by it, and another where Riley mistakenly invites Sierra over and she acts all too kind-hearted. Both stories manage to be as entertaining and relatable as each other. Field Trippin' is more of an adventure story, with Todd replacing a boring field trip guide with an Australian macho man. And it helps that the puzzles and traps the gang encounters are thrilling and engaging. Sheer Pressure is the one where Riley replaces her cheerleading squad instructor with a hippie who values spirit more than actual skill, so the squad goes downhill. Meanwhile, Sierra quits and starts bonding with Todd over being a Trekkie. That's really neat, and I wish she was given more stories like this. Master Foe was an episode about Todd learning martial arts from a wise old man, then replacing him with one of Agent K's old teachers. It's a small world, but also a varied and interesting one. Great fight scenes in this episode. A Little Tiff is the one where Abby's sister Tiff moves in and develops a crush on Todd, who doesn't want to date her due to the massive 1-year age difference between them. No kidding around, I know this can be a very touchy conflict for some people, but this is still a text worth absorbing. In Phoneless in Pleasant Hills, Riley loses her phone and Buzz nabs it, just about learning the daring secret. It gives them a bigger threat to face and makes Buzz more intimidating, and I mean that in a good way. Halloween Spirits has everything you'd want in a Halloween episode: silly costumes, creative visuals, and a story that indulges in mystery and fear factor. It's a scary, good time, and one I'll surely rewatch this October. Pleasant Hills Confidential once again involves the Fleamco secret almost breaking out, with Tom selling replacements, and a snappy journalist from a previous episode returning, snappier than ever. It brought a lot of elements in the show to a head to really question if Todd and Riley still deserve the phones, and makes them fight to keep their secret privilege, and their privilege a secret. London Calling leans more into British spy parody, with Todd and Riley learning more about their mother's side of the family, and getting into a plethora of secret agent hijinks. It's got great new characters, cool animation, and is really funny. It's the complete package. But my favourite episode would have to be Puzzle Me Daring, where Todd's the only one who can solve a bunch of riddles being left by a crook Agent K's hunting down. It's witty, filled with mystery and action, and some great bonding between Todd and K. And the B-plot, where Riley and Tasumi play dumb to attract boys, is a silly counterbalance to the A-plot. Now for those bottom 7, starting with Conrad's Day Off. As the title implies, Todd and Riley can't replace anyone for the day, while Riley's stuck in detention, where apparently, no joke, kids are being locked up and used for slave labor. What the hell is George Stapler Middle School? Volcano Island was a pretty run-of-the-mill, paint-by-numbers Survivor parody. I just reviewed one of those, and this one doesn't add much new to the table. Shelton's family's fine, I guess, but they could have been used in any other scenario. With Double Trouble, I gave up caring about the Riley-Johnny relationship, when she's very easily convinced by Sierra to embarrass his cousin at a school dance, thinking she's his new girlfriend. It's the final nail in the coffin, and thank goodness, this was getting pretty annoying. Best Friends for Never has Riley and Tasumi fighting over a non-issue for a very long stretch of time, then forgiving each other like it's no big deal. Also, the school counseling scene gives me crippling anxiety. They went overboard here. Extra Credit is about Riley maxing out her mum's credit card while shopping on a pony convention website and doing everything she can to not tell her. A family's finances have been taken by an evil pony. I just can't be entertained by that. Davy Hunkerhoff is a real downer. Riley follows a teen magazine's guide on how to get a boyfriend, which is apparently the worst idea ever. She gets a new swimming pool lifeguard to make Johnny jealous, but just ends up looking like a jerk and ruining pool time for everyone. Not very uplifting. And my least favourite episode is Injustice is Blind. Todd meets a blind kid who's a massive jerk and keeps getting him into trouble. I'm sure blind kids would love this portrayal of themselves, if they could see it. They also amp up the flatulent humour here. Great. And Riley has this subplot where she gets an advanced copy of the last Harry Potter book, convinces the author to change the ending, which makes people hate it upon its official release. It's not like I needed to like either of the plots anyway, though they were right about J.K. Rowling being a nutcase. Best to end this review on a better note, the finale, Irreplaceable. Something's up with Fleamco, as Todd and Riley's parents have been replaced with a more perfect pair. So they, along with a modified car, and Hakobo, Tasumi, and Shelton, go to Fleamco to find Dr. Scorpius has taken over the company. Agent K and Conrad are tied up, the latter getting a face reveal, while Dick Daring and a bunch of other replacements went and saw Incredibles 2. After a big battle, it's revealed Conrad is actually Todd and Riley's uncle, and he created the Fleamco service just for them. And with that, they decide to go public, with Todd and Riley now working for Fleamco and getting snazzy mustaches. If that sounds like a lot to take in 22 minutes, that's because it is. I like the story here, the last few developments for the side characters, the return of some earlier replacements, and the twist regarding Conrad, but this really should have been a two-parter or something. There's a bunch happening, so the softer, more meaningful moments have less gravitas than I would have wanted out of a grand finale. I like it all the same, it's a fun episode in its own right, but maybe they could have saved a few of these ideas for a potential reboot. You never know what's going to come back. It's been 11 years since the replacements ended, and I largely think it's held up. It has fun with its characters and stories, is animated pretty well, and I'm sure what it says about phones and youth has some enduring relevance, just as much as the family hijinks and the state of America's public institutions. Only the first season is on Disney Plus as of now, and I don't see that much of a demand for season 2. I wouldn't call it a show worthy of a huge cult following clamoring for this to change, but revisiting this part of my childhood was fun, and I'm happy that this show holds up. Remember kids, always think before you send your PE teacher to Hawaii. Goodbye for now.
Up next, it's Doug.
That's me.
On Nickelodeon.
Why, Ichabod Cornelius Underpants! You didn't tell me you were running!
I wasn't. This happens every year. Every stinking year.